don't by the phone. It's already
I'm certainly this was.
This is preventing things for shade. I support you or never mind and party and deep position and elderly and to the road fill back and no one to it here. So it's all wondering. So you see all people above me.
Just like that.
I'm
Oh, I see what you keep.
Oh,
Hurt. But tonight, where's this? What?
We can't go in there. I like it.
yeah.
Yeah, empty to be buttle. That's empty.
Oh.
Oh, you scored. Oh, oh, yeah, everyone. I'm a record of Billy's too. No. I'm pretty sure. Yes, the middle know that. So, Johnny. Okay, my root education. Did you do James plenty now Kansas City was a great place on that kind of like pebbles, you know. No, it cool. Yeah, that's just direct next. It'll be hell yeah. No, it's like you know after that gavel, not that okay, Judge, I'm for here. That was fun. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Like, yeah, I just totally. Yeah, more there's a lemon. I think that'll match me. That from some. Apple.
Oh, no.
Nah.
Yeah. Twitter. Right.
I'm Trish. Well, let's check out home trader. Say a new.
Hold on.
Never. We're gonna let hash trade. Okay. CFT on squeak. So I was just saying, it wasn't like, so he, to shoot at Schmer. One thing I'm telling you, in the she other there, like, they can stop for because I'm doing other kind of he's on his right. Got doing it, he's got our company, and Jacob Bill. I can't even feel copying back. Matt, where's I'm more now, there's become a church's place. You know, well, just little dick of, well, how about you? Look, Mr. Doggy's day branching. Ram it. Says, hey, let me tell that, but I mean, what do you call the cat and when you say the same happens of no one, right? I'm sorry, I had a really fabulous sense for you.
This is
Right. You know, like, this, no, you do not systems, no. You know, that'll damn not back.
well. If you want to turn the route in with
I make because I was counting him. You know, I'm like, you know. These are, you know, looking at me, my guy, the understand, and that's terribly. Girls, I use 50, 100, might be more, you know, almost good. I'm not, just right, and did that, excellent deal, internet bears to be, and look at it, turkey. You know, see, these are,
Rita Mike, Rita who were lawfully in violation of posse comitatus, an army of federal bureaucrats had descended upon the area, not working through law enforcement and brutalizing the people of that area. They stood up for each other and they stood down the federal government. We're going to play you a clip of that in just a moment. But first, I want to take a look at how the press is predictably spinning this still a year later. A couple of progressive outlets here. We have Climate Progress says 1 year later, Cliven Bundy and his right-wing militia are still trying to seize public lands. No, it was never about them seizing public lands. It was always about his grazing rights. And if you want to talk about who are good stewards of public land, maybe you ought to take a look at what John McCain is doing in Arizona, Climate Progress. There he is taking lands that were turned over by treaty to the public, to the Indians, a sacred area, a historical area, an area for the public to use. He's turning that over to be completely devastated for the benefit of a foreign corporation. Pretty much along the lines of the Agenda 21 crony capitalism that Harry Reid was involved in all up and down Nevada. And of course, that was what Cliven Bundy, the last rancher standing, they had to get him out of the way so they could get mitigation for where they wanted to put their other projects. But he had rights. He had property rights, his grazing rights, as well as water rights, as well as people who have even mineral rights. Those are rights that are sold by the government, by the federal government, to individuals. That is real property. But of course, they don't want to allow that. They use the excuse of an endangered species, the desert tortoise, and the BLM grabbed those tortoises and then eventually euthanized them, saying they didn't have the money to feed them. Yet they had the money for an army to descend upon that area. No, the federal government is not the best steward of the land. It can be done far better, I believe. There's still issues. We still have to have oversight. But the public lands, I think, can be overseen by the public at the local level far better than it can be done at a distant Washington, D.C. bureaucracy. Now, this is the way that Salon spun it. They put a racist spin on this. Guess what? This is what they say this is what a white supremacy looks like. A party at the Bundy Ranch and a funeral in North Charleston. So what they do is they try to tie together this one-year anniversary party that they had at the Bundy Ranch where they served everybody barbecue, welcomed the public. They try to tie that with the shooting in North Charleston. Try to say that because it worked there, it was an example of white privilege. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I'm going to point out the differences between the failed demonstrations in Ferguson and what happened here, and it has nothing to do with white privilege. But then they also try to take the extremist Jared Miller and his wife Amanda. They say they traveled to the Bundy Ranch only to be turned out, but they would go on to execute 2 Nevada police officers in June. They took it upon themselves to be the vanguard of the Bundy Rebellion. So even though they do mention briefly that they were thrown out, they don't give any credit to the people there at the Bundy Ranch standoff to police the outside agitators in their midst, the provocateurs, and throw them out. Instead, they try to tie them, as we saw Harry Reid and others do. And they go on to say, in the end, the 2 officers were the only casualties. And Bundy's boys went home with not so much as a Band-Aid as federal agents were backed down by a veritable army of militiamen. That, ladies and gentlemen, they say, is white power. No, it is not. It is the power of the community. The community came together. They managed it very well there. There's a lesson to be learned, and it's not one of racism. It's how can we stand up as a community in the power of the community, posse comitatus, to do the right thing, to protect each other, even when law enforcement, who has the responsibility, won't exercise that responsibility, even when the federal government breaks posse comitatus and acts in an unlawful and unconstitutional manner. Here's that full report that we put together.
Sheriff, this is what we the people are asking this morning. Disarm the Park Service.
We're faced with a decision to either get the cattle or be the cattle.
But we're staying here until they're gone.
We want those arms picked up, don't we?
The crowd is now moving forward toward the barrier. The police have been telling everybody they are going to shoot if we don't move back.
As we approach the one-year anniversary of the standoff at the Bundy Ranch, I want to take another look at what happened, especially in light of the lies and slander from media like Glenn Beck and the dangerous characterization by Obama, Harry Reid, Homeland Security, that labeled the community standing together against brutality as domestic terrorists. On April 7, 2014, Paul Joseph Watson wrote an article, Armed Feds Prepare for Showdown with Nevada Cattle Rancher, with the subtitle, Ruby Ridge-Style Standoff Brewing, as Bundy says he's prepared to be killed. The property rights dispute had been going on for decades, but now things were beginning to come to a head. Hundreds of federal officials, aided by helicopters, low-flying aircraft, hired cowboys, began rounding up Bundy's cattle the preceding weekend as Bundy accused them of trespassing. And as supporters from the local community and protesters headed to the area to demand that the feds back off, the BLM had created a First Amendment area out in the middle of nowhere where demonstrators could voice their concerns, but nowhere else. This area right here, this small area here, was cordoned off with orange temporary light construction barriers marked for free speech zone. It just shows you how quickly your free speech zones can disappear. When you allow them to be contained to a very small area, it's gone. But we're here and we want to tell the BLM something about how upset we are with what's going on here, but there's no government agency here to listen to us. That's the whole reason you don't confine people to remote areas from what's happening. Not only had the federal agents been confiscating Bundy's cattle, they had also set up agents with sniper rifles, pointed at the ranchers, pointed at the protesters. The crowd had been building throughout the week, and on Saturday there was a huge crowd. To defuse it, the sheriff came in the morning to address the crowd and tell them that the powers that be had graciously consented to allow the last rancher remaining in business in the area to continue grazing. Never mind that he had had most of his cattle rustled by the army of BLM contractors for the past several weeks.
With that being said, I believe a press release has already been put forth that the BLM is going to cease this operation. The Gold Butte allotment will be reopened to the public.
Much to the surprise of the sheriff, Bundy said that wasn't good enough.
Sheriff, this is what we the people are asking this morning. Disarm the Park Service.
Right.
And Lake Mead and Red Rock Park and all other parks that the federal government claims they have jurisdiction over.
Yeah.
Take your county bulldozers and loaders and tear down the entrance places, where they ticket us and where they enter us and make us citizens pay their fees. You take down you get the county equipment out there and tear those things down this morning.
Yes, sir.
What they wanted was for him to exercise his authority as the only lawful law enforcement in the area and to disarm the BLM agents and contractors who had been pointing their sniper rifles at the protesters and ranchers, confiscate their weapons, tell them to leave the area, and then stacked the weapons on stage. Bundy gave him 1 hour to do so. At the end of the time limit, Bundy announced that it looked like the sheriff wasn't going to do anything. No one was surprised. But what did surprise us, and surprise the Federals, was his announcement.
I guess he's not coming, so I guess we had presents. We thought we had a sheriff here, but evidently we don't have a sheriff here. We're going to go and take the rest of them out of the compound trails up here above the freeway.
I was one of the first ones to get down to the area where the standoff would occur.
Okay, people are now moving. They stopped for prayer.
They had vehicles, they had guns that were pointing at us, and they had shields. And they had a loudspeaker that was announcing that they would shoot if we did not leave the area. The only mainstream media that was in attendance was one cameraman from Fox News. He desperately wanted to get over to the BLM and interview them, but he was scared to death, as you can see in this video, that they were going to shoot him. He kept announcing that he was with Fox News. He pulled up his shirt to show that he wasn't armed. They kept telling him to go back. They did not want him to come to interview them. They were in a fighting stance. They had 80 different cars, each of them with just one BLM agent.
Now, it's a standoff. I've got a count of 107 vehicles.
107, okay.
Going on the road.
That's
And, the thing of it is all 107 of those vehicles were armed with armed army.
Yes.
That always fascinated me.
Absolutely.
Why would the State Highway Patrol allow an army like that onto their highway, and then why would that army be able to pass through the city of Mesquite without any resistance, through the state of Arizona without any resistance, through the port of entry into Utah without any resistance, and that army disappeared in the state of Utah, and not one media, no question. That army went across the United States without one question asked.
An army of BLM agents, 107 cars of armed men. This is exactly what the Posse Comitatus Act prohibits. It's not just a prohibition of the military being used for law enforcement. Understand that Posse Comitatus is Latin for power of the community. The Posse Comitatus Act prohibits the president from usurping the true Posse Comitatus, the true power of the community, with his own posse of armed federal agents. There were clear distinctions, too, from Ferguson and other places where we've seen protests about a government that's out of control. In Ferguson, businesses in the community were destroyed and burned. As InfoWars has pointed out, in Ferguson, these looters were coming from outside of the community. They were not the core protesters. And of course, the same thing could have happened at Bundy Ranch. I believe the reason that it didn't was because the militia threw out people who were dangerous or provocateurs. People like Jared Miller, who later shot 2 cops in Vegas. But rather than give the militia credit for expelling people like Jared Miller, the media used it to demonize them. Another difference about the Bundy Ranch was that there was a clear, achievable objective. The people were peaceful, but they were determined.
The police have been telling everybody they're going to shoot if we don't move back. People are moving forward with their hands in the air, holding flags with both hands in the air. It's a mixture of people on foot, as you can see, people on foot, and cowboys.
They decided they're going to pull those pins, but it's only going to be Bundy and his son. That's it.
It's the people or not, and you guys need to leave.
Okay.
You need to leave. That's the
and I'm
term.
telling you, you need to de-escalate the situation.
No,
I'm
you need
imploring
to
upon
leave.
you your responsibility to
This is
de-escalate.
how you
Listen.
You are on Nevada State property.
Okay.
And it is time for you. No,
There's a
the
time
time
for
is
discussion.
now.
We're doing that.
No, the
But you
time
need to
is
push
now.
these people back so they can do a safe call. Push them back so they can do a
You
safe
leave. Cattle coming in 30 minutes, but we're staying here until they're gone. Okay? That's what we're doing.
I can back some of these guys up if you promise they won't run me and my
Hey,
partner down.
whatever you tell us to do.
All right.
As long as it's not to not compromise this mission. We will do. You have authority.
All I ask you to do is just hang tight.
Okay. So we're all right where we're at? Okay.
This is 1776. No, it's not.
That's right. What happened, what we call the Boston Massacre, was an angry mob. You can call them a bunch of drunk rowdies. It's just like guys that like barroom brawls. I just love being in a fight. There's guys like that. They're belligerent. They'll fight anybody.
We were misrepresented by powerful voices.
So these people who hold themselves out to be patriots are not. They're nothing more than domestic terrorists.
We rode over there. We didn't come charging, guns a-blazing. We were not armed. There were a couple of cowboys that had rifles in their boots, their saddle boots. There was one or two riders that may have had a sidearm on their persons. None of them drew them from their scabbards, from the boots.
I know Glenn Beck wasn't there, but he can see from the videos taken by the people who were there that nearly all of the people at the standoff were not armed, and those that were had them holstered, even as the bureaucrats, all of whom were armed, pointed weapons and threatened to shoot. People with no guns in their hands, marching in defiance to troops threatening to shoot them. That was in the spirit of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. But let us not forget that it was Gandhi who said, among the many misdeeds of British rule in India, history will look upon the act of depriving a whole nation of arms as the blackest. Whether or not you agree with Cliven Bundy's position on his grazing rights, everyone should be appalled at the conduct of the BLM, its agents, and its hired contractors. Free speech containment areas, government snipers pointed at protesters and ranchers for weeks, violent, brutal confrontations with peaceful protesters, all manifestations of a government that is dangerously out of control. The Bundy standoff wasn't just a news event. What we saw with the showdown was that there are still Americans that won't be treated like slaves. There are still Americans that will stand with their neighbors against an army of federal bureaucrats and contractors that threaten and brutalize them. What we covered in the rural West was a government out of control and acting provocatively, as we would see again in just a couple of months in Ferguson. Unlike Ferguson, the crowd would not turn into a mob attacking its neighbors, burning their businesses. The community stood together with each other resolutely and in a determined way made it clear that they were not looking for a fight, but they weren't going to back down either. What the Bundy family and their neighbors demonstrated to the nation was that power truly lies with the community, and that when the community stands together, neighbor with neighbor, against a violent and brutal government, the thugs will back down and slink away. Unlike Glenn Beck and Obama, Thomas Jefferson would have approved of what happened at the Bundy Ranch standoff. He wrote in 1787, "What country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that his people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms." For InfoWars Nightly News, I'm David Knight.
My name is Alex Jones. Most of you know me from my syndicated radio program and my documentary films, as well as InfoWars Nightly News. When I got on air 20 years ago, I had discovered the logo world and just went on things every day. I mean, I comes live west, because on things I've seen now, all the way to 30 pounds, way off and smell out, I will do an eye and up.
Oh, I got it. So finally, okay. Yeah. Can we get back to my Twitter page?
I'm gonna do something real fast. Hold on a second. Done. Okay, so we're going back to where? Drudge?
No, Twitter.
Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter.
Yeah, so if you scroll down a little bit on my Twitter stuff. Okay, so I'm poking fun of lesbians and Harry Reid there, right? But see, mostly what my Twitter account is going after the Mormons because, you know, I am the foul-mouthed prophet, and this is just my job to do it. So Mormons are supposed to know about all this stuff that's coming down the pike at us. We got this Jade Helm exercise coming up here pretty soon where Utah and Texas, part of California, have been labeled hostile, right? What sort of clues do the Mormons need? You know, I mean, you can't hide your head in the sand for too long. I mean, can you? I mean, I suppose you could, but if your head's in the sand when the danger comes along, I guess that just means your ass is hanging out, don't it? Okay, so if you want to, scroll down a little bit till you find something in me poking fun of Mormons. I'd say probably half my posts have to do with calling Mormon men feminine, so it shouldn't be too hard to find something. Check it out. Yeah, that's a nice little post I made, because see, people attack Mormons all the time, especially attack Mormons from the 1800s all the time, because they're not around to defend themselves anymore, right? But I'm good at defending those people too, and I'm just not doing it because the people in my church don't deserve that defense. They need to have as much shame as possible heaped upon their heads to get them to do what they already know is right, okay? So if you scroll down a little bit more, you can find something where I'm calling them homos or pussies or something. But every time I call them names, I put a scripture quotation with it, right? Because they do not obey their scriptures. If they obeyed their scriptures, they wouldn't have me heaping shame on them, right? And yeah, so yep, that's me, Herberb01, and I do as much as I possibly can to get myself excommunicated. I mean, Twitter is pretty damn public, isn't it? See, there I am. That's a frame from one of my episodes where I'm reading my scriptures. I think that's a pretty good pic of me. You can hardly tell how ugly I am in that one. Yeah, so I'm all about criticizing Mormons. Nobody comes after me. I challenge them to come after me. I'm like, hey man, if I'm speaking evil of the Lord's anointed, then I should be held accountable for speaking evil of the Lord's anointed. But no one holds me accountable, therefore I must not be speaking evil of the Lord's anointed. What it comes down to is the Lord's anointed is fucking evil. And so because I'm out here saying it and I'm actually backing it up, if anybody ever wants to check out the tweets, the conversations I get into, go ahead, man. You'll see that people just do not want to interact with me very much because I call them on their bullshit immediately. You know, Mormons always try to tell me that the scriptures don't mean what they mean, what they say. You know what I mean? It's like some of this stuff isn't open to interpretation. It's like, thou shalt not kill. It's pretty plain and simple. It's pretty black and white, cut and dried. You know, don't go stealing, don't go, you know, coveting somebody else's old lady. You know, that's pretty cut and dried stuff. There's no way to interpret that. If you ever go to LDS.org, I should have opened up a page at LDS.org just so I could pull up scriptures, because Mormons are silly enough to put all their scriptures online. And that does nothing but give me an opportunity to show people exactly where the scriptures contradict Mormon leadership. See, now, you heard me saying earlier about Chuck Cox, how he's actually the one who caused those two boys to be murdered, right? Well, here's the thing. We don't even know his daughter is dead yet. He just had her legally declared dead. And in my own opinion, just Herberb's opinion, this is not Herberb prophesying or anything, I'm saying she got involved in some sort of sexual bullshit in Utah that people do not want to talk about. They got involved with the wrong people with influence and power, and she ended up dead. And he, it appears to me, essentially fled Utah to protect himself and his children from whatever stuff he got his wife involved in down there. Now, I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm saying that they got involved in things that Mormons do not want to admit exist. And the fact that Susan Cox turned into a giant slut because her father wasn't masculine enough to raise her correctly, well, it's Chuck Cox's fault that she's dead, if she's dead. And it is certainly Chuck Cox's fault that his two grandsons are dead, because he was doing things completely contrary to Scripture. He knows that a father is a father, and just because he has the opportunity to bring in some bigger bully to come beat up his son-in-law, doesn't mean you should. I mean, people can have all kinds of opinions, but those opinions do not override rights, especially the rights of parents. And when Chuck Cox put as much pressure as he did on Josh Powell, he, through the mechanism of blood sin, actually murdered those two boys. See, it's one thing to kill somebody in cold blood, blah, blah, blah. It's quite another to set somebody else up to do that crime. See, somebody who's not looking to do that crime but gets forced to do it, it's not really his crime. Reference for this is James 4:17. It's sort of the inverse of James 4:17. James 4:17 says, to paraphrase, if you know the right thing to do and you don't do it, well, then you own that sin, okay? Pretty simple. The inverse of that is, you don't know the right thing to do and you do something evil, you're not essentially held accountable for it. See, he that hath the law, to him he is held account, right? Mormons will tell you, he that sinneth against the greater light receiveth the greater condemnation. Or he that is without the law hath no hold upon him. These are all gospel principles, right? It's like this: Jesus isn't going to send you to hell because you didn't get baptized because no one told you to get baptized. It's just not going to work that way. You didn't have the law, doesn't apply to you. Chuck Cox, on the other hand, he has plenty of law. He knew that it was completely inappropriate for him to interfere in anybody else's family, especially without any evidence. No proof of anything actually having happened to his daughter. And honestly, the only person on the planet that Chuck Cox can blame for the demise of his daughter is Chuck Cox. Because like I said, if he had raised her in accordance with the scriptures, wouldn't be having this discussion right now. Wouldn't have 2 dead children. I think one was 4 and the other 6. And we wouldn't have a man committing suicide because he killed his own children. Chuck Cox is the evil one in this one, not Josh Powell. I don't care if Josh Powell is guilty of killing his wife. He is not guilty of killing his sons. And the fact that he went to such lengths to keep his sons with him throughout all eternity, that's exactly what he did. I know it's perverted, but that's what he was out for. Since he went that far, I am absolutely convinced that he didn't have anything to do with his wife's murder. Because if he was the sort of person that would kill his own wife, he'd have to carry around on him a mark of cowardice, right? And the mark of cowardice, first of all, was not on him. And the mark of cowardice would have prevented him killing himself. But the fact that he was driven to protect his family unit to the point where it was worth ending all 3 of their lives together, that to me demonstrates that he felt enough about family that he is probably not guilty of killing his wife. But since we don't have any other evidence besides what I'm talking about, all I'm doing is speculating as far as her death. But what we do know is how Chuck Cox behaved in the media, how the Pierce County Sheriff's Department essentially stole Susan Powell's diary so Josh Powell couldn't defend himself with her own writings. It was a dirty deal all the way around. And I'm here accusing Chuck Cox of murder. Yes, I'm accusing Chuck Cox of murder, and I'm daring him to come and do something about it. I'm daring every Mormon on the planet to come and do something about it. I'm accusing Thomas S. Monson, the prophet of God's one true church on this planet, of conspiracy to kidnapping. And you know what? Nobody's going to do anything to me about it. The scriptures are pretty clear. I got to be put on trial. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen because they can't convict me. I say Thomas S. Monson worships Satan. I say every Mormon on the planet that supports him as prophet, seer, and revelator also worships Satan. And I don't care how ignorant they are of it. They have the scriptures. They're not allowed to be ignorant. Can't say that you didn't know. And you have especially our scriptures, which tell us, you guys know. No excuses. So that's where we are. I'm good with this recording. I'm ready to wrap it up. Will, how about you?
Yeah, why not? I think you've done a hell of a job. It's kind of, yeah. As we get catch-22, everything seems to be a catch-22 today, doesn't it?
Yes, catch-22. I'm glad you brought that up. You want to pull up catch-22 and I can show people what it's like to talk to your bishop. So if you go to YouTube, this will be great, man. We can, and on, for effects, would you put on computer? I think that's camera 5.
Oh, okay. Where now?
Camera 5.
Camera 5. 5.
Over here. Here.
Oh, that one? Yeah. Okay. Camera 5.
Yes.
Camera 5.
Camera 5.
Okay.
And a YouTube channel, and we'll watch the major.
Where's camera 5?
It's the computer.
Oh.
The computer is camera 5. Didn't know that, huh? Yes, the computer is camera 5.
Okay.
Camera 4 is up there. That's the one you were using earlier. Yeah, camera 5 is straight feed right from the computer.
Got it.
Number 9.
Yes. So one more.
So yeah, YouTube page, and we'll look up Catch 22. Major, Captain Major, Sergeant Major. That'd be confusing if you were a sergeant and your last name's Major. That'd be messed up. You know, there's tons and tons of Woods in the military. Tons and tons of Captain Woods, tons and tons of Sergeant Woods, tons and tons of Lieutenant Woods, and yes, there's occasionally some Major Wood.
Catch 22.
Catch 22. And we want the Major. Ha, Major. I don't like my part. Is it up?
It's trying
Catch 22. It should say Major. That's the one we want. So, want a full screen?
Sure.
Oh, you're using 4 again. Is it buffering?
No. No, it is.
So this is what it's like to try to talk to your Mormon bishop about anything that he doesn't want to talk about.
It's buffering.
You know, that just might have to be the end of the recording today.
I know that,
Oh,
sir.
here we go.
We all have to do our part, I guess.
Well, I don't like my part. Sergeant, I'm going to take the rest of the afternoon off and lie down in my tent and think about things.
Sir, there's someone waiting to see you.
Now?
Yes, sir.
Who is it?
Captain Tapman, sir. He's a group chaplain.
Well, what does he want?
I don't know, sir. Something to do with Captain Yossarian.
Look, Sergeant, the job that I have to do is tough enough without having to deal all the time with a lot of people who want something. Do I make myself clear?
Yes, sir.
Suppose you're wondering about this.
No, sir. It's not my place to wonder.
I don't like people staring at me, Sergeant. People stare at me. Did you know that?
No, sir.
That's because they're thinking, who is that Major that he gets to be squadron commander without ever having flown in a plane?
Oh, I don't think people are thinking that, sir.
Well, they are. When I have this on, they don't know who I am. Did you know in the Middle Ages, Sergeant, a lot of princes and kings used to put on disguises and walk around their subjects?
No, sir. I didn't know that.
Well, then I guess you don't know everything then, do you, Sergeant?
No, sir. Why did they do that?
Why did who do what?
Why did those princes and kings walk around in disguise?
How the hell am I supposed to know, Sergeant? I'm not some historian or anything. I'm just a guy trying to do his job. Good afternoon, Sergeant.
Sir?
What is it now?
What do you want me to do with the chaplain?
Sergeant, from now on, I don't want anyone to come in and see me while I'm in my office. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. What do I say to people who want to come in and see you while you're in your office?
Tell them I'm in and ask them to wait.
For how long?
Until I've left.
And then what do I do with them?
I don't care.
May I send people in to see you after you've left?
Yes.
You won't be here then, will you?
No.
I see, sir. Will that be all?
Also, Sergeant, I don't want you coming in while I'm in my office asking me if there's anything you can do for me. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. When should I come in your office and ask you if there's anything I can do for you?
When I'm not there.
What do I do then?
Whatever has to be done.
Yes, sir.
Sergeant, I'm sorry to have to talk to you this way, but I have to. Goodbye.
Goodbye, sir.
in South Carolina. There are many tall pines in South Carolina. There are many tall pines. I remember the oak tree we used to climb. Should I let you adjust that, or should I stand over here? But it makes me feel better. Each time it begins, maybe like right there. It's a hard way to find out. Maybe since I'm not playing this right then, maybe I will do that. Very good.
Weighs less than helium, and they couldn't name it or identify it, but it's there.
Yeah, this is.
Still couldn't talk about it.
This is.
Because the government won't let any university talk about anything that isn't government approved.
Yes, that's the whole accreditation process for schools. I mean, I've got enough credits for 2 bachelor's degrees. I don't care if either one of them ever posts, because to me, having a degree, all that doesn't say that you know what you're talking about or know how to get things done. All that says is that you've completed a specific curriculum. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, the better your grades are, probably the less you know how to think for yourself. I mean, the better your grades are, the better you are at regurgitating what somebody else gave you to regurgitate.
You accept their limitations, they're yours.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Livingston Seagull, I believe that was from. And I don't want your limitations or anyone else's limitations. I want to look at the world without limitations. Whatever I want to build, I build it. And I try to make it work. If I don't succeed at first, I try again and again.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I tuned out of elementary school the day that they showed us how electricity supposedly works. You know, they have the little kit with the light bulb and the 2 wires and the battery and the switch. And you're supposed to connect all this stuff together, and you're supposed to figure out at the end of the experiment that just as much electricity comes out of one end of the battery as goes in the other end of the battery, right? But at the same time, apparently, according to their math, you lose a little bit of that electricity when you produce light. Now, you and I know that that's not the case at all. If there's 1 volt coming out and there's 1 volt going in, then you're not losing any electricity in the exchange. But somehow they expected me to buy this. I mean, it's like telling somebody that 2 + 2 = 4 and it also equals 5, which, you know, that just doesn't compute. And so I kind of tuned out from the whole educational.
I had an engineer on the phone the other day, and when I was explaining to him why the corrosion occurs around the terminals on a battery, he said, yeah, but why does it occur down at the starter? I said, oh, because when electrons are being pulled from the battery to the starter, the electrons are spinning and they create an electrical vacuum behind them, pulling the battery vapor down through the cable until it gets to fresh air again.
Mm-hmm.
And then it starts corroding the other end. And he said, oh, I didn't know that. They don't teach that in school. I said, no, they don't. And they don't teach you that if you don't seal the top of the battery around where the posts come through, like they used to in 1910 and 1920 with a little rubber seal, then the vapor keeps coming out, corroding the terminals. and battery companies want them to be corroded, so they don't want a seal there. But you can take any kind of silicone sealer, fingernail polish, and put it between the plastic and that metal part, and you'll see it seals it, and the vapor quit's coming up, and you don't have to replace battery turbulence. They stay good for 50 years. But we don't want you to know that.
Mm-hmm.
9 out of 10 batteries that are turned back in to be recycled, there's nothing wrong with them.
Look
It's just
at the sound.
corrosion.
You can't hear it.
Dude, you gotta stop, all right? I'm running the damn board.
All right. But we can't.
I'm paying attention, and you're interrupting me
All right.
doing my shit.
All right, well, that's no sound.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you continue.
Come on. One of you take over.
Okay, please continue. We have control of the sound again.
Batteries are designed so they don't last more than 1 year, 2 year, or 5 year by the length, the distance from the bottom of the chamber up to the bottom of the element. If you were to raise the elements up, take the top up, cut them down, put them back in, every battery could last if you had a removable top for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So why didn't anyone come up with a lifetime battery? Because there's a law against it. You can't even transport a battery. If it has acid in it, you can't transport it legally unless you're buying it for the purpose of your own vehicle or your own equipment. You can't buy a battery and transport it without a license.
Because it's a.
Taking total facts to make absolutely sure we are controlled.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I agree with you on that, Paul. Now, as far as the proposals with the Fukushima runoff, the plasma technology, not only developed by Gil Brown, the hydroxy stuff, the type of technology you developed, and we've notified them right after it occurred, and they wouldn't listen, would they?
I've offered it to Fukushima people. I've offered it to BP, and they said, no, get the heck off our beach. If you come back, we'll have you arrested. People over in Japan said, I'm sorry. We're only working with our own companies and people that are up in politics that approve things. And yours isn't approved for any country that uses Federal Reserve notes.
Yeah.
So I've got the same response from Chernobyl, from every place where this is coming from. We are not interested in your help. Stay away.
What's your thoughts on, for example, on YouTube, you can go online, and I've mentioned to people years ago that my partners and I had worked with the famous Jack Keller, Jack Keller is a mining engineer working on a patent system that we had developed on the transmutation of nuclear protons into being neutral, being non-nuclear, from applications of something we called the Barker effect. Michael Wells Mandeville brought up this in several published papers you can find online that reflect the patent that was filed by us in '93 that lasted only a few hours, that the plasma technology, in Brown's gas, let's say, whatever, that you can transmute. And we were working from that point on with Jack Keller, also from the standpoint that you can grow gold, you can grow silver in an environment. You can actually grow it, meaning, and apparently in some of these experiments up to 10 pounds of gold being grown a month. Now, kid you not, people. And it was based on anode technology collecting gold ions from a kind of a hydrogen peroxide, H2O28, some H2O35, something, whatever, and creating the environment. As I mentioned to people, when you create points, like on the distributor of your car, you have more amps grounding than you do dispersing, a lot more, 4 times more. And if you do this in an environment where you're creating like a gold hydrogen peroxide, well, why is it that for so long nobody ever realized, gold is a crystal, so silver, so is all metals, so most elements, and that they grow, literally grow. You can create the environment to grow gold. And go online, go look at the guy growing silver on YouTube. And we were doing that in an environment where you could actually take a microscope and you could actually observe the crystals forming. And this whole thing was done, this was over 20 years ago, but was resulting in 10 pounds of gold crystals growing in a month. Now, there's more involved, more physics. This was considered a top secret type project of Boeing. And in infrared spectrometry, you can come up with new types of ways to take those ions and then turn them into crystals, gold or whatever, metal crystals. You can do things, make things, but of course you're not supposed to know that.
I can barely hear you.
You can't hear me?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. I'm just mentioning, Paul, that about the experiments about being able to transmute the elements or even growing rare minerals and metals, for real. And Pantone plasma technology, that's all right. That's all part of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. People don't know, Maybe now that they do, maybe a few of those future students will start showing up to learn this. This is important. We're in a time period where these crooks could take tungsten steel and plate it with gold, micron level thickness of gold, and make you think it's a gold bar, which they've now polluted the entire gold industry that way, and emptied Fort Knox. And I try to tell people, I said, well, now you know that you could just simply grow the gold back again and fill Fort Knox up, grow it back. I mean, for real. I mean, people, where are we? Where have we been for thousands of years? Where's our minds? We can do this. We can create what we need. Right, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just suggestions in your classes. You could show people how to transmute things like that. I'm sure, right?
There are certain things we are not talking about publicly because we really don't want the government coming down on my door again.
I know, I hear you on that.
I just spent 3.5 years locked up in maximum security because there were things I was talking about and doing that the government did not allow.
Right. But then, I agree with you on that. But if people are aware, they're awake, just be aware, people. They're bankrupting the world. They're using nanotechnology on all of us everywhere possible. Even the chemtrails. I mean, it goes on. They want to create super toxins, and they want to experiment on us while they murder us. And who knows what type of neuroeconomic electronic warfare they're using as well. But hey, Paul, so in preparing a person's house, a person's community, let's say where do they start? Like a Pantone, where would you first use Pantone plasma? For water, for power, where would you start?
Because it's illegal to use water as a fuel that would replace gasoline, unless it falls under the 1951 National Security Act, I would probably teach people how to use gasoline or whatever their current fuel is and just get a 50% improvement.
Yeah.
So in the classroom, we do teach more than that, but we're not sending that out publicly.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is good. I mean, you got to start somewhere and kind of go along with the way they are and all that kind of stuff. So in gasoline, meaning you would apply it to using it on the car, cutting back on fuel consumption, 50%. I can do that with hydroxy gas as well. There's all kinds of people on YouTube show you how to do that. There's just one way. It's infinite, people, if you can deal with that. But for example, how to adopt it to getting more gas mileage, right? That'd be one way. Right? Paul?
What?
Use it for getting more gas mileage. Kind of get to know it. Get to know what you're doing without upsetting the establishment too much. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't do it without upsetting the establishment too much.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Because, the Gestapo, the Nazis, we keep letting them in the White House under the Bush name. And by the way, their granddaddy Prescott founded the Nazis, people. And how many millions of people died? You keep putting him back in the White House. And now Jeb wants, it all makes so much sense. Now, on an international level of how we think of Pantone plasma physics, Paul, let's say I want to go forward and I'm going to start working with the cannabis community, right?
Yeah.
And I want to use some Pantone technology. In that sense, from my standpoint, when I had to help write the Organic Farm Bill, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, how do we begin to write laws, regulations, and codes on how new, or let's say technology that's not customary technology, applies, because we have to write standards and laws and codes and stuff as we build an industry. So there would fit into that kind of what we have to do. So where do we start to write those codes? Where would you recommend that we write codes? Let's say if we're going to use it for, gas extension, you got to say this is how, that not just how it works. works real well. But I've got to write a code and a law and a thing saying that, but this is what a county or a state or a native tribe might want to write into their books, operating this technology in their jurisdiction. Okay?
Well, the states are in on it with the feds. It's not just about state tax, it's federal tax for road repair money.
Yep.
If everybody started getting too good a mileage, they wouldn't have money to repair the roads.
Yeah.
And you don't want to build good, high-quality roads. They want to keep building roads that use a lot of oil products to perpetuate our need for oil.
Right.
So as long as the government that we now have is in place, we're not going to get new laws written. Even down to the local level, when they start getting interested in the city or county, all of a sudden they're told by higher people, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And then the feds come in and say, no, absolutely you're not going to do that. We don't want roads that will last 100 years. We got to have guys out there holding a shovel and people holding stop signs up. We can't do things in logical, practical order that last a long time. We have to have built-in obsolescence.
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up. Because one of the things that really bugs me about the way the economic system is set up these days is it doesn't have to be this way. And you lived in Utah among all the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints, right? And you know I'm the foul-mouthed prophet. I understand a few things about my scriptures and about how the world works and whatnot that disqualify the people who run the show from running the show. And see, because here's the thing, man. If we all just follow the scriptures as they are laid out for us, and see, you being an inventor, I know this for a fact because I've sat in your living room and we discussed where you got your inspiration. It's the same with all inventors who come up with something over Unity. All they do is they study the scriptures and apply it to their studies, or they study nature and discover that essentially it is the same thing that the scriptures they say themselves. Now, Mormons. Now that Judge Royal. As in noble. Yeah, this guy, I know, I'm absolutely positive this guy is Mormon. And what did he do to you when you come up with something that could change the economic way things happen? They put you in jail, and they try, they put you on psychotropic drugs. They drilled holes.
No, they wanted to, but when I first got to the Utah State Hospital, I talked to the guards immediately how to build geek, to go home and prove to them I'm not nuts, it works, then come back. If I'm not right, hold me down and give me a shot. Well, once the guards went home and started putting it on their Jeeps and their motorcycles and their generators, they were coming back going, hey, this guy's real. He's a political prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
He's not crazy. He's here for other reasons. Somebody put him here.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody doesn't want this knowledge out there. One of the guys came back and said he put it on his father's motorhome. And he...